Oh, God, look at it. Look at it. It's horrible. Drizzly, damp, grey. It's just a nothing day for photography. So why would you bother coming out? Well, I would argue that you should come out with your camera on days like today. And I'm going to give you 5 creative ideas of things that you can do or shoot when the weather is just basically nothing weather. Basically the worst landscape photography weather that you could imagine, minus hurricane, rain and winds. And even that would be more interesting than this dull, flat nothingness. Minimalism, colour and high key. Such a great thing, such a great subject and a great way to think on a day like today. So when you think about light in photography, what does light actually give you? Well, it gives you contrast, gives you colour, it helps separate the landscape and isolate subjects. So when there's no light, the landscape can feel very flat and therefore you wouldn't necessarily think to go out and shoot. Okay, so we haven't got colour in this instance. We'll look for a subject with a bit more colour, but what we can do is create a minimalist composition that has that fine art feel where there's no confusion for the viewer, there's no distractions, they know what they're looking at, and it's all about a single subject. That is a great type of photography to do on a day like today, on the dullest of dull days. I guess another way to look at it is to go out and practice simple photography, like keep things as simple as possible. Because the more complexities you have in your image and in your landscape, the more that you need that light and that colour in those conditions. Whereas nice, minimalist, simplistic photography, well, you don't need any of that. And when you're framing a simplistic kind of minimalist composition, you really have to be intentional with everything you do, from the angle to the placement of your subject, because if anything's off, it's going to be really obviously off because there's nothing else in the frame to distract you. And I'm shooting it high key. I mentioned this before, high key. And all that means is the image is going to be quite bright. This is a rescue platform, by the way, so when the tide comes in, if you get stranded, you can climb into there and you can wait for 6 hours until the tide goes out, which is pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, so high key, just brightening things up, lifting things, using those whites in the sky, and that's all we have, white skies. So yeah, minimalist compositions, single subject, fantastic on a day like today. So this is going to be my next example of that minimalist clean subject where you don't necessarily need light to make it work because we have contrast and colour. But I'm not so sure this is going to be so simplistic because the seas are huge and they are crashing in the background. So actually I'm quite excited to see how this image, whoa, see that? I'm excited to see how this image might come out because I think it's going to be different to what I picture in my head. But yeah, there we go. Another great reason for coming out when you might not necessarily think of coming out. You never know what you're going to get. Whoa, there we go. And what I'm waiting for, as you've just witnessed, is waves to come crashing over the sea wall, right where this life ring is. And this life ring is my point of interest. It's my colour, it's my contrast. It's everything that, whoa, everything that light would normally give you. And because today is so dull and flat, the waves are huge. Because the light is so dull and flat, we need to find our own colour and our own contrast. And that would be one of the things I would advise you look for on a day like today. But it just so happens that I have all of that and incredible waves. So I'm really excited about what we could get with this shoot. Oh! If that's not the one, if that's not the shot, we're not getting the shot. Oh, flipping heck. Now, if the weather is really that bad, you could consider coming indoors. So I'm currently beneath the River Tyne. Look at this. We're in the pedestrian tunnel. We've got County Durham there, and then we come over here and we've got the County of Northumberland. So this is pretty cool. I was in Budapest not too long ago with my Hasselblad X-Pan and had the most amazing time going around and photographing the old undergrounds. Now I didn't make a video, but I did write a newsletter article about that, and I'll link to that article below. And if you like that article, then of course you could consider signing up to my weekly newsletter. But fired off whole roll on the X-Pan in Budapest, and it was scenes not too dissimilar to this. Absolutely fantastic. So if it's grey and miserable outside, consider what old cool buildings or underpasses or even bridges you have in your local area, because I'm telling you, there's going to be some good stuff to shoot. Well, as much as I enjoy photographing these cool tunnels, I'm not too sure about making videos in them. It's kind of awkward when people walk past, and the only way, well, the shot that I'm looking for is obviously straight down the tunnel, but with a figure walking towards me or walking away from me. But the problem is, I'm basically a creep in a tunnel. So when you look down the tunnel, sort of, 100 yards that way, and you see a lone figure stood waiting, it's not cool, man. We've just had a bit of a look. We had a few people walk down the tunnel, and I was doing a straight shot down the center of the tunnel, and it was all good. And then I tried the old zoom and shoot method, where you pull zoom, and then as you're pulling your zoom, you fire a shot at a somewhat long exposure, 20th of a second, and you get this awesome blur, this kind of narrowed down. And when you've got a figure in the center of your image, or as close to the center as it's possible to get without asking somebody to walk, it looks awesome. So yeah, really, really happy with this. I'm starting to get a bit more comfortable now. I'm not that creepy standing here, but just, yeah, it's cool. Getting some good shots and thoroughly enjoying myself. So I think I want to go back to Budapest, if I'm honest, and do some more of the undergrounds there. That'd be awesome. But yeah, having a lot of fun with this. When the weather's grim like it is today, patterns and textures, you would be amazed at how quickly you can lose a couple of hours just by wandering around an area, just like this harbour that I'm at now, looking for interesting details and things like old boats, for example. You don't need any good light. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. And if it's raining, that doesn't matter either. Just looking for colours, patterns, textures. It's a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it as something to do when, well, yeah, when you wake up in the morning, look out your window, and all you want to do is go back to bed. Don't come somewhere like this. Oh man, who would have thought you could derive so much pleasure from peeling paint on an old boat? So I've been here ages, just walking around looking at all of the different colours and the textures. You genuinely can lose yourself, and I think here I found my favourite image, which is perfect because today is such a grim, dull day, and this is such a grim, dull subject that you would never think to photograph, but somehow it works. It's nothing but a twiggy, sticky bit of weed against a dark, black fiberglass background. It's awful, it's dull, it's boring, but when composed and photographed, I don't know, it has something about it, something really nice, a good abstract quality. Annoyingly, it's very difficult to photograph because there is a constant breeze, so it's just moving all the time, so I've got to go high ISO, fast shutter speed, and wide open aperture at f4, but I think because of the abstract nature, I think any softness in the background, or even if there's a tiny bit of motion blur, I think it will be forgiven. So there we go, abstracts and close-up patterns and textures. So when the weather is truly diabolical, and I don't mean perhaps windy and raining, I mean nothing, flat, white skies, no atmosphere, no mood, nothing in the landscape to speak of, no autumn colours, no spring flowers. Surely one of the best places to come is a waterfall. So one of the reasons that waterfalls are such great subjects when the weather is so drab like it is today, and that's because the white sky, which let's be honest is quite terrible for landscape photography, is actually perfect for this kind of more intimate photography because it acts as a giant softbox throwing even light into this deep valley where we are now in this ravine. So all of the deep dark shadows get lifted. We've got nice highlights with the waterfall. Now if the sun was out, it would be horrendous. There'd be light bouncing around everywhere and it would be a disaster and it'd be too contrasting, it just wouldn't work. But on a day like today, everything's just soft and beautiful. I'm gonna pop on a polarizer so I can control a little bit of the glare and reflections coming off some of the wet rocks. And I'm gonna stick a 4-stop ND filter on, and this is gonna slow down my exposure so I can get an exposure time of about 5 or 6 seconds. And that should give me nice soft motion in the water. So as we leave the waterfall behind and make our way towards the next item on the list, I just want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. Now, if you don't know who Squarespace are, they're an all-in-one website building platform. So as a photographer, you're probably going to want your own website with a nice online gallery, perhaps an online store where you can sell your own products like prints, books, calendars, that kind of thing. You can register your own domain. And with Squarespace, you can even have your own members area, which is pretty cool. So if you fancy giving that a go to squarespace.com/Heaton where you can get a free trial. And if you like your free trial, use the offer code Heaton for 10% off your first purchase. And if you get stuck at any time, well, Squarespace have 24/7 customer support. So all the links are in the description below. And we will now move on to our next item. Ah yes, a staple of the dull weather photographer. Long exposure, black and white, fine art photography. One of my favorites in today's list. Although saying that, I'm not sure how much success we're gonna have today because that sea is incredibly rough. And with a long exposure, I like to basically flatten out completely all of the waves and the swell so you get a really clean image. So this type of photography actually works best on really dull days when there's no swell. Yeah, we'll have a look anyway. We'll get the 10 stop on. Right, 10 stop. See what this does for us. So with a 10-stop filter, I'm going for a 3-minute exposure. We'll see what that gives us. My composition is nice and simple. It's a square composition with the pier in the background and this metal pole sticking out of the water in the foreground. Oh, that water is getting really close. Tide's coming in, so hopefully this exposure will finish. And, oh, 3, 2, 1. 1 second, 1 second. There we go. Let's have a look at this shot. Come on. Oh, yes. I like it. I really like it. It's exactly the reason I love this type of photography. Today is a dull day. It's really not great, but with a bit of creativity, picking a nice composition, the use of a 10-stop filter, and you really can create something quite special and yeah, just something different and make the most out of the conditions. So yeah, really happy with this one. Really happy indeed. Now that was a productive day of photography. I think considering how bad the conditions were, at least on paper anyway, flat light, basically the worst conditions you want when you wake up in the morning for a bit of photography. I got loads done today, absolutely loads, but I think as much as I've given you kind of like, I've broke it down into sort of 5 creative ways you can, do photography when the weather's rubbish. What it ultimately boils down to is picking the right location for the right conditions. One final tip I'll give you in this video is, well, it's not really a tip, but I think it's an unsung hero, yes, and that is a good old photography guidebook. This one, Photographing Northumberland, I actually used this today to find some of the locations, like that waterfall. I didn't know existed, and found it in the guidebook. This one's by PhotoView. I'm gonna plug it because they've been very generous and they've offered viewers of the channel a 20% discount on the books, which is great. That excludes books that are already on sale and pre-orders. But yeah, that's cool. So there's a link below, but photography guidebooks in general are very, very handy things to keep around. I have 2 books available myself, and I also have my weekly newsletter, which I've already mentioned to with regards to my shoot in Budapest. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something or taken something away from this video, and I will see you all next week. Cheers, guys. Bye, 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 bye. Oh.